r/AskReddit. People who don't have an internal monologue going on in your brain. What is it like? Wait, people don't have one? Me like big fire. It's pretty awesome. I can smoothly say all the things I want to say out loud. It's quiet. Turns up nose and adjusts monocle. I don't believe in such nonsense. It sounds much more efficient. Abstract thoughts, urges and motives being spoken in some internal voice sounds horrible and inefficient. It's a wonder you freaks rose to the top of the food chain. Unless of course you only did by climbing on us. But though to action with some console writing each command drones, who may be a part of some simulation, sounds like one would always be one step behind the curve. And it also raises all those silly questions of, how do blind people dream? What language do people who know many languages think in? How can deaf mute blind people like Helen Keller think? Blissfully quiet. Most of the time it is quiet in here. When I'm particularly anxious or angry, the narrator kicks in. It's very hard to do, but I try to ignore him during those times. We have internal dialogues. Sometimes there are interdepartmental meetings. Once a year the shareholders get together for a question and answer session with the chairman. I hope my answer is satisfactory for you. If not, please hold while I connect you to our complaints department. Mine is constantly singing Baby Shark. Are there people who don't have one? I don't get it. I have one but not constantly. Hard to explain. It feels like making connections, which it literally is. But I don't see or hear anything. I just say what I'm thinking. So it's pretty weird. I can't imagine having one. Is it like having an imaginary friend in your head? It depends on the situation. Sometimes when I do something that I think is funny, my brain is like a sitcom and the audience gets it. When in actuality no one understands the joke. Other times it's just like, what the fuck is up with life? Wait, life? Life isn't trees. Trees grow oranges. You know, oranges have a really strong smell. Like shit. Shit has a strong smell. Oh, you know, that reminds me of our Iamatital piece of shit. I should check it out. Speaking of checkout, I have to got to the grocery store to pick up oranges. They fall out of trees. And trees are lively. Hey, life is lively, WTF is up with life anyway. Or something like that. Wait, I'm confused. Do I have it or not? Cause it's not like there is a voice in my head all the time. I just process things through feelings and images, but if I want a voice in my head I get one. It's just weird. I mean, I can talk in my head but there isn't a voice just narrating all my actions. We mostly have nonverbal thoughts. If I were to think about an apple I would imagine the taste, smell, and the color red, but never really use words to describe it. It's mostly a continual loop of music. It doesn't feel like anything. I've often been met with the maybe your brain's overactive argument when I mention my current sleep issues. But I correct them by telling them I don't have any thoughts in my head. It's like an empty void in there. The only inner monologue I have is a song constantly stuck in my head. Otherwise, I have to consciously talk in my head. Oh, that makes sense. My boyfriend and I recently discovered we're different. He was like, OMG, watch this video, can you believe some people don't have an inner monologue? And I was all like, what? You have an inner monologue? Everything is very abstract to me. Like I pull things out of some compartment back in my brain. I can't really describe it well, honestly. Oh great. Another shit question on AskReddit. Sorry, I can't turn it off. I don't understand the question. Do you guys have like a narrator up in your heads? A little David Attenborough doing a step-by-step on your every thought? Are you putting your thoughts into words first inside your head and then repeat it out loud? Is that what is normal? In my head it's just thoughts. Abstract concepts that make sense in my head and that I can immediately put into words if required. I wonder if they're surprised at what comes out of their mouth. Is every sentence unknown until it's said? I let mine out to play a lot of the time. I'm an oral learner, so it helps me to work things out when I can hear them. I've long since given up on what people think of me and found my groove in life. That groove involves me talking to myself. What if my internal monologue is a 90s talk show with snippets of Jerry Springer thrown in? Also, I use medication to mute it. Ask Jeff Day 6. He did a podcast on this named How Did I Get Here? I really recommend checking it out. It's when Aaron and Dan from Game Grumps were doing that one episode where at the start he was saying stuff out loud like they were thinking they were saying it in their head. I don't think I really have one. Not all the time anyway. I'm not very intelligent. It's just silent, I guess. I try to think as little as possible. I have multiple layers of internal monologue. One that's more instinctual, subconscious, like when you're half asleep and your brain spits out random thoughts except all the time, and one that's literally just me thinking normally. I acquired an internal monologue later in life. Never had one. Then, at 16, I had to do a lot of fiction writing. And it sort of developed. It started as the voice of certain mentors. Now it is there as its own unique voice. I find it a bit noisy at times. I still miss the old way of thinking as the internal voice can take on a judgmental tone at times. Other than that, I can still handle advanced maths concepts and other technical stuff just fine. So its presence did not change anything. Edit. Also, my internal voice has been female at times. But I am straight, masculine, male. I do sometimes click back to no monologue when using basic calculus trig matrices and other skills I learned pre-monologue. I think in my head actively but don't have a voice narrating everything. What kind of stuff does the internal monologue say? Like incessant talking in your head? You ever seen Pete Davidson do anything like that? Dude looks like the only thing going on behind his eyes is a constant hum. I have one, but on discussion with my wife she doesn't. She visualizes things instead, which I have a hard time doing. She's a lot more artistic than me, which may be a coincidence. IDK. Peaceful. I read a lot. Self-educate. Meditate. Etc. I am comfortable in silence and solitude. But being in a noisy, chaotic settings, like Walmart on Black Friday, can be uncomfortable. Going to the house of someone with 9 loud kids would be unbearable. Well, you see, it's actually really peaceful. It's just a repetitive animation of myself putting golf balls all day long. Sometimes I have an internal monologue. Sometimes I don't. When I don't, it's kind of hard to describe, but I would say it's like I'm making connections and stuff, but I'm not always fully aware of what I'm thinking about in the same way as I am when I have an internal monologue. My mind never stops. I meditate in bed before going to sleep. My imagination and thoughts run so deep that I sometimes catch myself having a dream while I'm half awake. I'm never bored because of it. But it can also be dangerous cause if I'm at work or driving, I can drift off in my own mind and fall asleep. The majority of the time. It's fun. But then it can be a pain in the ass. Edit. My apologies. I realize my comment doesn't answer the original question. Sometimes I wish I didn't have that internal monologue was my point. If I focus hard enough, my internal voice won't be working for shit and I just do things without it. Don't know how to explain it. Rarely happens cause I can't focus for shit, LMAO. It's quiet, serene and makes you literally be in the present moment. It happens mostly when I golf, whereby everything goes in autopilot all while you remain extremely focused. However, if you catch yourself doing it, the moment is gone, and your interior monologue comes back in force. This is usually followed by a stark drop in performance. My thoughts are visual. I see things in my head, and I feel things, and I intuit things, but I do not hear them. I only have a monologue when I am trying and struggling to articulate something and I am worried I will sound like an idiot. Otherwise I function almost autonomically. I was overhearing some really dumb Kelly Bundy type chicks talking about how they can float. My thoughts are organized in a kaleidoscope pattern. It's quite peaceful when it stops arguing with everyone about everything. I have abstract thoughts. I don't hear words in my head unless I want to verbalize my thought, in which case I hear my own voice trying to form words that accurately describe the abstract nonsense that happens in my head. I also don't see images unless I want to. I often talk to myself if I want to organize my thoughts because they are not always fully fledged. My parents look at me weirdly when I do this. I have one additional question. People with no internal monologue. Do you sometimes have songs with lyrics stuck in your head? I do the act in my head. I don't have multiple personality is more like improvised Rakugo. It's like trying to explain hearing to a deaf person. I guess the best way to explain it is that I just kinda think in pictures. You'll just have whole ass sentences running through your head 24/7? Doesn't that get tiring? What about babies? They don't understand language to be able to do that, right? I have an internal monologue until music starts to play in my mind. Which happens often to me. Music ends up being a background soundtrack to my life. And it's nice just to listen to this background. Maybe those who have no internal monologue at all are just listening to the background. Whether there's sound or it's quiet. For me it's just quiet. If I'm trying to think of something there's just a pause until the idea is complete. Most people you can see when they're thinking something, but I get told I just have an expressionless face. I don't really have words most of the time. Like, unless I'm planning out what to say or actively talking to myself. I don't think in words. It's more like I see scenes play out in front of me. But in my head? Like when I'm bored. I'll just choreograph a song I've heard in my head. Or visualize something cool that I want to happen. Like an argument I never got to have. Sometimes I'll have words. But that's mostly if I'm hyping myself or beating myself up over something intense. Otherwise, it's mostly scenes. Quiet. I don't hear my voice inside me head. Not even when I'm reading or trying to memorize something. When my sister started talking about her inner monologue, I thought she was making schizophrenia jokes. Can't relate. It's like me talking to myself without speaking. I have no idea how to describe it. Basically just a voice narrating everything or reading lines I read right. Like this very comment. The voice is just saying in my head what I am writing. It basically is kinda like those people that just constantly talk while doing something. Though, it is probably also a bit weird that the voice in my head changes depending on circumstances. E.g. when I watched a lot of Dr. Who, my voice started to kinda talk like the Matt Smith version. Also, it changes from German to English and vice versa all the time for no reason. Of course it isn't doing this all the time. Basically just the times I am actively thinking. It is like a 24/7 time life infomercial of everything I've absorbed for more than 3 decades. In fast forward. With a psychedelic blur stitching together the entirety of the images and sounds. I've gone virtually my whole life being told I lack a filter. Not realizing that the internal monologue is the filter. I lack both. I guess. I'm genuinely surprised at some of the things that come out my mouth. They certainly don't form as a conscious thought ahead of time. I'm an abstract thinker most of the time and it gets kinda hard to talk to people honestly. Since all my ideas are images, sensations, and they aren't directly connected to any words. If I want to say something, I always have to think of how it is that I can describe the idea first, and it's not very easy. Sometimes when I have an idea it doesn't even come in image or emotion. It's just an inspiration. For me it's some sense of knowing what to do. I simply know what to do. I don't know if maybe I'm just too dumb to connect my thoughts with words, or other people are like that without necessarily being slow thinkers. I'd put it this way. You know how you sometimes have a clear concept in mind, but you can't remember the word for it. Sometimes it may be on the tip of your tongue. And sometimes it may be more I know there's a word for this. It feels like I usually think in that pre-verbal mode and only translate the concepts into words when it's necessary. Not sure if the description above works for everybody. I don't have one. Never have. I can have thoughts and speak in my head, but it is forced. Like when reading. I also seem to have a good memory for recalling things others have forgotten. As a kid it seemed odd when I saw a cartoon where the character had a thought bubble. Basically, very quiet and easy to concentrate on stuff. Usually I'll have a song going through my mind that I'll focus on. And more abstract thoughts will be going off in the background. I think of them like quantized balls of thought. and it takes a little while to unravel them before I can effectively put them into words. Usually I have an internal monologue, but I find out that sometimes other ways of thinking pop up. The instruction manual. Basically I'm like that when I have to follow step-by-step tasks. That is, cooking. Do that. Then that for X minutes. Cut X that. The internal debate. When I'm indecisive about something, I like to question myself and two of my own voices argue. Until I can set up my mind. I only have an internal monologue during moments of intense pressure, such as an immediate threat to life or similar. Other than that my thoughts are completely abstract. They simply are. Do some people not? Seriously? How come people don't have one? I don't have an internal monologue. I have an internal committee. And they bicker with each other. Sometimes they do unite against a voice with very bad ideas. Those are usually executed by the other voices. We have an imaginary door on the 50th floor of our imaginary building and office. We kick bad voices out that way. Nice and quiet. No monologue here. I'd describe it as having ideas of something rather than the words. If I look at someone who is an asshole, that word doesn't come to mind. Rather a certain abstract feeling I guess does. One I've assigned the word asshole to, if that makes sense. Another person described driving without a GPS regarding how they remember where to go. It's the visual cues. I see the sign and my brain just goes take the exit. Mixed results. That guy never shuts up. I have a friend who is on medication that among other things causes her to not have an internal monologue. She hates it and misses having her voice in her head. I don't really think about it. Monologue? Hell. I'd kill for a singular voice narrating in my head. Instead I've got a mob of hysterical syphilitic shrieking rhesus monkeys.